You're listening to Part 1 of Season 2, Episode 3 of Agreeable Disagreements. Yes, there will be a Part 2 available shortly after we publish this episode, and yes, it's entirely because we couldn't shut up or get it together and stay on topic. Were we both taking our meds? Maybe, but probably not. Are we sorry that now you have to, nay, get the privilege of listening to twice as much of us in 1 week? Not even a little bit. So enjoy it, all 22 of you listeners, none of whom are my wife or immediate family members. You're welcome.
Made it.
Okay, Andrew, this is objectively the worst joke I have heard all month long. This was told to me by a fellow teacher who is a combat veteran Marine.
It's already not funny.
Did you hear about the chocolate record player?
No.
It sounds pretty sweet.
Oh, God.
I told him I would like that joke better if it was darker.
All right, folks. It's been fun.
Oh, man. So you would say maybe that you would prefer none of these cold opens? None of these jokes?
Oh, no, I actually, I do think that's really funny.
No, that's a reference to Nikki Haley's loss.
Oh.
Because she lost to none of these candidates.
Okay.
In Nevada.
That was a stretch.
Ah.
You can do better than that.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to.
You're really milking it.
Oh.
See what I did?
Yeah.
It's back to the chocolate thing.
Yeah, and you could argue the stretch is a taffy joke, too.
No. That was...
No, you don't. No. I'm trying to hand you something on a platter.
Okay, that was a little bit better.
That one wasn't even meant to be a joke.
Well, it still worked better. All right. So, but first of all, welcome to Agreeable Disagreements. It is a podcast where two friends with differing political ideologies talk about events from the week's politics. We have a lot to cover this episode.
And some of it is stuff that we have already talked about, so we're going to keep some of it short, and some of it is stuff that it's a rather short topic. Like it's not necessarily that there's a lot happening, it's just that they are relatively big things. And so hopefully we'll keep it to a normal length, even though we've got twice as much stuff on our docket. I guess worst case scenario, we could split this into two.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see where we get to. And then if we need to do a part 2, we'll just do that. But the first one is Nikki Haley losing Nevada, being the only real contender in their primary.
So, to be fair, Nevada has a really weird primary system because they have two different Republican ballots to choose from. There is the caucus, which was held by the Nevada Republican Party, and Trump took that with 99.1% of the vote.
Which he did intentionally with a bunch of different states.
Right. But Nikki Haley did not even appear on that ballot for the caucus.
Right. By her choice.
By her choice. And on the other ballot, it was Nikki Haley, but it was not Donald Trump.
Right.
And voters could vote in both or either the caucus and the primary. So if you wanted to vote twice, you could vote twice.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it says voters can, I'm looking at ABC News, voters can cast ballots in both the caucus and primary.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. However, the problem is the way it works is that the state requires them to have a primary election, but the Republican Party voted amongst themselves to hold a caucus. And so even though she was the candidate who had the top number of votes in the primary, she doesn't get any delegates from it because it's all the delegates are determined by the caucus. And
oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was more of a I'm hoping to just get media attention from this because she knew she wasn't going to win that one. She, I think, at this point is trying to hold out until South Carolina's primary because that's her home state,
Yeah.
and
Which
um,
I don't think she's gonna do any better there.
I don't think she's going to do any better there. But I think at this point she's running for the sake of having an option,
Sure.
um, and but I mean, I've said this before. I don't think she stands to lose anything by continuing to run because she's getting a lot of decent media attention. By continuing to run, she can, in the next election cycle, run again and say, I'm the only one who stuck it out no matter what. Everyone else gave up. So why would you vote for someone who gave up easily when you could vote for someone who stuck it out when it got tough? And I think,
well, and
especially
with how quickly, especially Tim Scott,
right,
just becoming.
they counted 10 votes, and I was none of them. I'm out.
Yeah, but then, like a couple nights later, showing up at Trump rally and being like, "I love this guy," and it's like you're singing a different tune now. And I mean, same with DeSantis.
Well, yeah, I agree. And I think one thing that people don't realize is that there are two kinds of people who run for president. There are the people who genuinely want to be president, and there are the people who want to get to that next step in their career, and the only thing in their way is visibility. And so running for president makes them a much more visible person, because you can't tell me that Pete Buttigieg, having just been a mayor of South Bend, Indiana, actually thought he had a shot at being president. But
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
By running for president, he got himself on the TV. He got himself a lot more media attention, and he definitely progressed his career. And, say what you want about his politics or stances, that's a smart move. And I think a lot of these, I think Vivek is the same way. I think Tim Scott is the same way.
I would think that Buttigieg, I think somewhat naively ran for president, at least on some level, because he did want to be president. But I definitely don't think that it was, that it never crossed his mind that, this could just help me get to, some Secretary of Transportation or some other, department or something. I think Vivek never had any intention to be president. He was running essentially to be Donald Trump's partner on the area, vice president.
And well, the thing is, like, all of these people who run knowing they're not going to win are also on the understanding of there's still a chance that I could win, and it would be good if I did. I would argue, and this might be controversial, I would argue that President Obama, when he first ran, was not in the second party, the one who genuinely thinks I'm going to win this thing. Because he ran on his first time as a rather nameless senator who very few people at the time had heard about. And he was running against big name Democrats at the time, such as Hillary Clinton. I mean, on paper, it's the same as looking at Tim Scott. And, I think he decided, hey, I actually do stand a chance. He started getting more attention and votes than he maybe anticipated at first and ran with it. But I do not think that when he ran for that first term that he started with the intent of, I'm 100% in, I know I'm going to be president. I think it was, I'm going to try and progress my career, get some more media attention, and if it works out, it works out. Oh, hey, it's starting to work out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that, but having read his, at least the first, which I hope he was supposed to come out with the second part, but his memoir, which I can't remember what it's called, but I almost said Decision Points, but I think that's George Bush's memoir.
A Promised Land.
A Promised Land, yeah. Having read that, I think that at the very least, he didn't really expect to get as far as he did. I mean, he didn't. I don't think he started it with the expectation that he would be elected president.
Right.
I also think it's important to take it into context because you have a lot of like weird things that happened that took out some of the front runners.
Oh yeah.
The Howard Dean thing with the yell that we've talked about on the podcast. Yeah. And then John Edwards, I think his like extramarital affair came out around that same time. Hillary Clinton is just unlikable. That says nothing about her ability to, actually, like be the president, but people didn't like her. So
yeah.
I mean,
well, and so bringing it back to Nikki Haley, though, the reason that we wanted to talk about her is because the Nevada primary means nothing, right? Because it doesn't dictate who gets any delegates. The Republican Party in Nevada has given voters an option to voice their disdain or dislike of the candidates by giving them the option to vote none of these candidates. And that was the winner by far, with more than 68% of the vote.
Oh, okay.
68% of Republicans who voted in the Nevada Republican primary voted none of the above.
Wow.
Not even a write-in. They didn't even write anybody else in. They specifically chose none of these people.
Okay, that makes sense. I do think it's very interesting, though, that Trump, since the 2020 campaign season, has been talking about all of these fictitious attempts to rig the election. And then I think it was, among others, but Mark Meadows, his former chief of staff, who after he left the White House, I think he was partially responsible for this setup of like, oh, we're actually going to do a caucus and not a primary, which is just blatantly trying to rig the election.
Fun. We live in the best of times, my friend.
Yeah. I can't tell if you're just like, this is too we have too much to get through and I don't want to comment on that, or if you like I can't tell where you're at right now.
I will be honest, it is a mixture of dissociation.
Okay.
And
fair.
Trying to decide which tabs I need to close.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
But it's not, let's get going. But speaking of which, let's get going.
Let's get going.
Yeah. That should be the title of the podcast. We're going to change it from Agreeable Disagreements to Let's Get Going.
I think we should just change it to, oh God, what now?
Oh God, what now? Yeah. Okay. Very on the nose.
I honestly because we rescheduled this recording because of some work things that I had to do. I have been eating, breathing, sleeping, nothing but politics for at least the last week, if not 2 weeks, and it is starting to have a profound effect on my mental health.
Yeah, well, you should stop it.
I need to go outside and touch some grass.
You do. Yeah. This is not the time of year to do it in Oregon, though. It is rainy, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's usually when we have green grass.
Oh, that's right. Because it's either green and rainy or it's all on fire.
Or it's just, yeah.
All right. Well,
it's
the first
funny,
thing
that's true.
The first thing that we wanted to talk about is that report that recently came out. Well, I guess it's not the first thing. It would be the second thing. Nikki Haley was the first thing. But so just as at the same time when Trump had Mar-a-Lago raided and they found a whole bunch of documents that he shouldn't have taken home, they decided to also check out other presidents and vice presidents and officials. I thought it was around the same time.
It was around the same time. Biden volunteered.
Yeah, no, I was going to make
Yeah.
that distinction and say,
Yeah.
like, before we get, because I don't want to get bogged down in the should they have had these documents or anything.
No,
'cause
I mean, they shouldn't have.
Yeah,
They know
it's
that.
pretty.
We know that.
Um,
And before we continue on, basically, we agreed beforehand that we're not going to get bogged down, like Cameron said. I think ultimately what it tells us, though, is kind of the same thing of like Hillary's emails, where it's like, yeah, everyone in this position has been doing this. It's not unique, but it is a problem.
Right. And my response because that was one of the things that Biden said in response is why, they showed that I've done the same thing that every other president has done, which that may be true.
Excuse.
But as a teacher, right, when I get on a student for talking out and they go, well, everyone else was talking out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or it's like, I hit
Does
my
that
kids
make it
because
okay
my
for you
dad
to
hit
talk?
me. It's like, that's not any better.
Right. So, yeah, we agree on the idea or the fact that they shouldn't have had these. The difference between Trump's issues and Biden's issues here is that it is and again, this is coming from someone who does not like Trump, but is between the two of us more sympathetic.
Yeah. I'd say that's a fair characterization.
I will say that Trump did try and obstruct that all from happening.
Yeah.
But so did Hillary Clinton. So it's happened on both sides.
Yeah.
So we all
that's
suck.
another can of worms. but yeah, nobody did right in this situation, but Trump did more wrong because of the extreme lengths that he went to obstruct, the congressional orders, the FBI, requests for like to search Mar-a-Lago, all that stuff. Also, I just want to point out he did at least tacitly try to sell certain documents to Saudi Arabia, which is not a good thing at all.
Well, at the same time, though, Biden read his notes out loud
to his ghostwriter.
To his ghostwriter.
Yeah.
So he gave them away for free and then tried to sell them to the American public.
Look, that's just being a poor businessman.
I think it's also
he should have read the art of the deal.
Oh my gosh. I think it is less being a poor businessman and more being, as Mr. Herr, the man who wrote the report on this, put it, a well-intentioned, feeble-minded old man with a poor memory. Or was it feeble? All, I don't know if he said feeble.
It was a well-intentioned, kindly old man with a poor memory.
With a poor memory. That's it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I just want to point out, Herr is a Republican.
Sure.
He conducted the interview that this whole thing, like this whole statement, it was essentially recording. That interview happened on October 8th and 9th. Can you think of anything else that might have been going on in Biden's head around that time?
No.
On October 7th of 2023? Nothing comes to mind?
Is there a football game on? I genuinely, I'm not thinking of anything. What was it?
That's when the Hamas attack happened. It was October 7th. So he was interviewing Biden a day and 2 days after that happened. And Biden kept that appointment because he knew that the optics would be terrible if he didn't. But he had some other stuff going on. Okay,
but here's the thing. If you're going to be the president of the United States, there is always going to be other stuff going on. And part of the reason that we are electing someone is because we think that person has the ability to handle it.
Yeah.
And even if I will say, I'm not sure that I could. I'm going to preface this by saying, if I was in charge of a country that just had to figure out what I was going to do for the atrocities that Hamas committed on that border with Israel, I would probably not have my full faculties available to me, and I would probably make some different blunders. However, right, I'm not running for president, and I'm not trying to convince people that I could keep it together. He is.
I mean, I think he did keep it together. I do think that there is some element
you just argued that he wouldn't have been able to keep it as well together at the very least.
No, I was just saying that he had other stuff that he was thinking about. So if he can't remember, if he had to, for a second guess whether he, became vice president in, 2009 or not, that's understandable. I can't remember what happened in my Dungeons and Dragons game the day after it happens, which leads me to a theory. And I have absolutely no basis to make this theory. But as somebody who has ADHD, every blunder that Biden makes that people attribute to his age are things that I make frequently because of my ADHD. So I think Biden might have just some kind of undocumented attention disorder.
I will give you some of that, right? I will give you some of that when it comes to losing his train of thought. I mean, I lose my train of thought in the middle of teaching class a lot of times. What I won't give you is the aimlessly wandering around stage, aimlessly wandering around White House lawn and having multiple staffers have to try and direct him the right direction.
God, no. Anytime I'm on the phone, not even when I'm not on the phone, I pace around anytime I'm thinking hard about something. I don't know where I'm going. I sometimes don't even know that I'm doing it. But, my roommates sometimes will walk into the living room and I'll just be walking around the dining room table.
Sure, but that's
what are
different
you doing?
Than...
They're like, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's different than you finished a speech and then you walk off and you have people chasing after you to come the other direction and you look at them and then keep going. Or when you get off your helicopter and you're walking and you've got your Secret Service agents directing you which way to go and you walk off the sidewalk as if it were still there and keep going and then have other people direct you. That happened. That happened.
No. I know. That could also easily be explained if he had ADHD. Anytime I'm directed to go somewhere, I'm like, oh, this way.
But he doesn't. He doesn't act like, oh, am I supposed to? He just keeps plowing on
right, because he's.
I have no idea what's going on.
I mean, all I'm saying is, I think, I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised either. However, one thing that's also important to remember is that there have been concerns about his memory since he was vice president. I was just watching Joel McHale's correspondence dinner speech where back in 2016, he was talking about that. He was talking about President Biden's memory problems and a joke. So we've had these concerns for the better part of a decade at this point.
Yeah. Well, actually, even longer than that, which leads me to believe that it's not because of his age. There are people who have been on his staff for 20 years who have come out and said, no, this is kind of always how it's been.
And that's fair. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're wrong because they are on his staff. They have spent more time around him, and I obviously have not. I would argue that these things are happening with more and more frequency, but I understand that the counter argument to that would be he's, as president, more in the public eye than he was as vice president or a senator. However, it's not that I don't think it's ADHD. I will say that is a possibility. But I mean, as someone who has ADHD as well, and as someone who works with a lot of people who do, now granted, the people I work with are largely children.
Yeah.
But also adults.
And ADHD is absolutely different for every single person.
Right. I don't get hyperactive. I just go back and forth between things. But I see it more in the same vein as I see when I look at my grandparents forgetting things and trailing off. It's the same. You don't trail off the same way when you have ADHD as opposed to when you're losing your memory and you don't know why you're there.
I don't know.
I've been around people with dementia, and it's very different than the people with ADHD, and I'm seeing the same patterns of ramblings and trailing off.
I'm seeing, because this last summer, my grandfather passed away from dementia. My grandmother, his wife, passed away from Alzheimer's 8 years ago. And I'm not seeing the same things that happened with them that I'm seeing with Biden.
Well, I think it's also important to note that just as ADHD presents differently in different people, so does dementia.
No, that's the problem with, say that.
And that's the problem with ascribing mental illnesses to people who haven't been diagnosed with them officially, because we ultimately don't know until they get a diagnosis. I do think, though, the big point I want to make is that, first of all, to preface this, Robert Hur didn't just say that Biden is an elderly man with a poor memory. He said that is how Biden characterized himself in their meeting.
No, he said that at least from what I read, and I think what you're referring to, what he said is he's not going to pursue any more charges because Biden's legal team, if they actually did go to trial, would use that characterization of him as a defense.
Yes,
and a jury would not convict him because of that reason.
And his reasoning that they would do that is because that's how they characterized himself in their interviews and
I don't know
research.
That I saw him say that Biden was characterizing himself that way.
So
everything that I saw was her making that decision, or that judgment, based on his interactions with Biden, not because of Biden trying to, because it wouldn't make sense for Biden to play that part up.
So he does. Okay, I'm looking at it on a few different sources right now, and the ones that I have pulled up are not the ones that I had pulled up yesterday. I will admit the ones that I saw yesterday, which may have been updated. I think no. I'll admit that one that I know for sure said that was on Fox. However,
and they've never gotten in trouble for lying to their viewers.
Yeah, well, so has MSNBC, which is where this current one that I'm looking at has.
MSNBC hasn't reached a multi-million-dollar settlement because of a lie and lost their top anchor.
My response to this is going to open up an entirely different debate about the power of liberal media as opposed to the power of conservative media in overall society, and I don't want to get into that, so I'm just going to move on.
That's fair. Can we move on? Speaking of which, though, and I think this is the thing that I was forgetting when we were in the pre-recording discussion. Can we please talk about Tucker Carlson for a second?
Oh, okay. Let's come back.
Do you want to move on to a different?
Well, no. Because move on to the point I was trying to make. Because all this was just trying to be context of her is saying that Biden, maybe if he didn't say himself, I'm an old man with a poor memory, he was saying that Biden was showing significantly limited memory during their 2023 interviews. And because of that, he would come out and act like or be characterized as an old man with a poor memory. And that is why they weren't pursuing charges. But my question is, if Biden has significantly limited enough memory that he could not stand trial, why is he allowed to be president?
It's not that he wouldn't be able to stand trial. It's that there is not sufficient evidence of Biden knowingly doing anything wrong, not specifically because of his memory, but because of, I think primarily because of Biden's claim that his staff were supposed to be taking care of this, and he entrusted these, documents backing up everything to his staff. And so he didn't know that these boxes were being taken to where they were. And I think what adds credence to that is that that's exactly the same thing that happened to Mike Pence when he was found with, or at least that's what Mike Pence claims, when he was found with documents.
The difference is, right, that Mike Pence had taken responsibility for that and
So
said,
did Biden.
I should. But part of Biden's defense was, I just don't remember a whole lot of this, right? I mean, part of the reason that they're not convicting him is because his memory is missing so much that they can't use his full testimony to convict either way, to convict or clear.
No, it's sorry. I have two things to say about that. I did interrupt you. Please continue.
My problem is that if his memory, short and long term, based on their interviews and based on the articles I'm reading, they're not saying it's just from things that are years ago. It's from important things that he should have memory of. Like, he couldn't remember what years he was vice president when he was in there. He couldn't remember what year or date his son had passed away. He couldn't remember a lot of very major important things that he should have been able to remember. So if he's missing significantly amounts of details from his own memory, from significantly important things, not just like minutia, okay,
Right,
but major events in his life. And that is enough for us to say we couldn't prove in court beyond a reasonable doubt because his memory is so lacking in so many ways. Why is he allowed to still be president? And why are we not trying to invoke the 25th? All to be fair, some are.
Here's what I have to say to that. What we're hearing about his lapse of memories in these interviews are what is hers first name?
Robert
Herr's perception. We are not hearing the pauses, or, I mean, it could very well be, and I think it probably is, that, and again, Biden, like the Hamas thing had happened the day before. He was in the midst of one of the most crucial global crises of his presidency. And he, what I think probably is the case was that because his mind was elsewhere and rightfully should have been, he just maybe wasn't as quick to recall those as Robert Herr would have liked. All we're hearing is Robert Herr's perception, and maybe not the most unbiased judge or in any way medically qualified to make any kind of determination about Biden's memory in terms of his age.
Okay, I will concede that, he had a lot going on, but just because he had a lot going on, it's not just that he forgot a couple of minor things. He forgot what years he was vice president. He forgot the whole debate about Afghanistan that he partially campaigned on, right?
Yeah.
Things that were super important to him.
Cameron, I forget
decades.
What month and year we graduated. And it was 2011, I think, but everyone graduates in June. So I should have at least remembered that. Okay. I forget how old I am sometimes.
But you're not the leader of the free world. You're not the person in charge of the world's most powerful military. You're not the person in charge of the world's most powerful economy.
But I'm also not an idiot. And I like to think that I'm actually, above average on the intelligence scale. To be fair, I could be absolutely wrong about that. That is what somebody who is below average probably would claim. But what I'm saying is
Dunning-Kruger effect. Much.
We're the Freddy Krueger effect.
Dunning. Keep talking. I'm going to throw my pen at the camera.
What I'm saying is, I think we're being given this information somewhat out of context, and I agree it's not a good look. It's not great. That I do think that Biden's age is in some capacity affecting his ability to make decisions, what have you. The other thing is that when Trump was going through the same type of investigation, I think he said that some form of the phrase "I don't know" 500 times. And if you're concerned at all about Biden not remembering things, then Trump doing that, however many fold more times should really concern you.
Okay, two things. One, I am very concerned about Trump. I don't vote for him, right?
Yeah.
Two, the things that Donald Trump was saying I don't know about were minutia for the majority of it, right? It was smaller details.
Well, also things that would have incriminated him.
That's fair.
I will
right.
say, but I will say, I think when if Biden truly did not remember these things, I think it's likely that he probably didn't remember them, and it was an illegal strategy. With Trump, it was basically his way of saying, I plead the fifth without pleading the fifth.
And the problem is, it's one thing to say, I don't know, to try and get out of something. And it's one thing to say, I don't know, because you genuinely don't remember. And
yeah. Although I do think there was a little bit of that with Biden.
Sure. I would be surprised if there wasn't. But
yeah.
And I would say here that I am less concerned about age so much as mental capability, because I would rather a 90-year-old who is in touch with the American people and mentally still there than a 45-year-old who's losing it, Yeah. But at the same
Unfortunately,
time,
Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away last year.
Yeah.
That's the only 90-year-old that I know that even comes close to.
Well, and at the same time, one of the other problems I have with all of this is Biden and the White House come out and say, my mental capacity is just fine. His mental capacity is just fine. But then he mixes up important world leaders in the same week. Not just for people who he either has or hasn't met, but for people who have been dead for decades.
Yeah. You're talking about specifically the Mexican, him saying Mexico when he meant Egypt. Because that is the very instance when I was watching his statement live. That is the very instance that I started formulating this ADHD theory, and here's why. Because I can absolutely tell you what that thought process is.
Sure.
He was being first of all, I don't think he should have gone back to answer that question, because he was on his way out and heard this question and came back and addressed it. I think maybe that might have been a misstep. But he was being asked about the situation in Gaza, and he clearly meant Egypt. Everything else, that was in the sentence that he was saying was, clearly about Gaza, Egypt, the details of what's happening around, the Israel conflict. But he said Mexico instead of Egypt. Here's why. Because one of the other things that, just like, in the interview with her, his mind was preoccupied by, something else that happened. One of the other things in the world's most chaotic political or week for politics that at least I can remember, that one of the other things that Biden's having to deal with is the border crisis. And so I think what happened was part of his mind was, and okay, this is a great example of my own ADHD. Hold on. here's what I think the thought process Biden had was. His mind was somewhat preoccupied by the border crisis that is going on in the US. And so he was thinking of, okay, the country that's on our southern border, that's Mexico. And when he started, recalling within his own brain the country that is on Israel's southern border, I think he just got mixed up. And I think that is perfectly explainable by ADHD, because ADHD is not truly attention deficit. It's an inability to regulate attention. So you have 5 different trains of thought going at once, and you can't necessarily pick and choose which one your brain is going to follow.
Sure. However, it wasn't just the president of Egypt. It was also the president of France and the president of Germany.
Oh, I didn't catch those ones.
Yeah. So
where was
he
that?
Also, recently he said, this is according to The Independent, he confused French president. Yeah, what?
Is this in the statement that he made the other day?
I don't know if it was in the statement he made the other day, but the president of Egypt and the president of France both happened in the same week.
Sure.
But he talked about how he met with the French president, Emmanuel Macron, but he called him Mitterrand from Germany. I mean, France.
Okay.
But Mitterrand died in 1996. Okay. And then a few days later, he also, so this is all 3 things within the span of a week, he also claimed to have discussed the Capitol riot with the German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, who not only died in 2017, but also was out of office in 1998.
Okay.
And
I mean, Biden's been in like a fairly powerful position in global politics since at least the 70s, I think.
Yes, he was sworn in as a senator in 1973. Yeah. But
do you know how many times I don't think I've actually done it, but I've come so close to accidentally calling my boss dad?
I think there's some other psychological issues there that you might need to talk out with a therapist.
Because here's the thing. Not once have I ever mistakenly called my dad Bob, who is my stepdad, or accidentally called Bob dad. I mean, in my specific case, they're equally, and they agree with this, they're equally, just as much my dad as each other. But I've never made that mistake with my 2 actual dads. Okay. But very frequently, I come so close to accidentally calling my boss dad.
Sure, but another really common issue with people who have dementia is that they mistake current people, even people who are in front of them, for people from the past.
That's true. It's the memory loss is retroactive. You frequently begin to forget the more recent things, which, I mean, honestly, I'll agree that does add a lot of credence to the theory that he has dementia.
And also in February,
I believe it, but
that's fair. But also in February, he forgot the name of Hamas during a press conference.
Yeah, he called them Tabbouleh.
I don't know what he called them. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You salad man. All right. But those 4 things are just from this month.
Yeah.
Right? And 3 of them happened in the space of a week. And we're recording this on the 10th of February. So in 10 days, he's made 4 huge memory lapses for recent events that have happened in his life. 3 of which he confused them for people who he met decades ago.
But he was also doing that same thing, at least according to people who have worked with him closely for a very long time. He was also doing that same thing decades ago.
Well, part of the issue here is that
if he did have dementia 20 years ago, I think what we can at least safely say is that the progression is very, very slow. And we have nothing to worry about in the next 4 years.
I don't know about that.
I mean, if you agree that what's happening now is a problem, and you agree that with the people who do know him and work with him have witnessed this happen 20 years ago, then I feel like you kind of have to, if you think that the reason it's happening now is because of dementia, you have to think that back then it was also dementia.
Okay.
And it's not like it's suddenly just sped up. I mean, that's not how that works.
However, if you're going to say that Robert Herr's special report has an agenda and bias, you should also say that his staffers are going to release statements with a pro-Biden agenda and bias.
I don't think so.
What person working for the president of the United States is going to come out and say, yeah, the president's losing it?
Sorry. I thought you meant hers staffers.
No. I'm saying, like, if you think that Robert Herr and his special report has an agenda and bias to say the president is not capable, then the staffers for President Biden, I guess I could have been more clear on that, but the staffers for President Biden are also going to be releasing the statement with a major agenda and bias.
But this isn't necessarily the staffers that are working with him right now. I mean, there are some that are working with him right now that have come out in his defense. There are some who, were on Biden's staff specifically, both when he was a senator, when he was, vice president, when, he and Obama were initially running for the presidential ticket. But I think most significantly, what I think adds the most credence is what Obama's staffers, primarily John Favreau, Obama's head speechwriter, not the
Iron Man director or Doctor in Elf.
Yeah. He was the Doctor in Elf.
Yeah, he was also the director.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay, that I did not know. Also, I just found this out recently.
Speaking of ADHD.
Yeah. Do you remember the Disney Channel original movie Smart House?
Oh my gosh, that's like a core memory that just got unlocked.
Do you know who the director was?
Is it Jon Favreau?
No.
Oh.
Better. LeVar Burton.
No.
Yes.
Jordy?
Yeah.
Reading Rainbow? Wow.
Reading Rainbow. Which explains why it was a great... I mean, I would watch that movie now. It was a great movie. For a Disney Channel
For a Disney Channel original, it was a good one. Anyway, okay, so back to this.
Anyway, yeah, it was LeVar Burton. Sorry.
Oh, God, what now?
I don't know where I was going with this. So Jon Favreau, who and John Lovett, not that John Lovett, the one from The Wedding Singer. And,
people need new names.
I know. It's very unfortunate. But they have been on their podcast, Pod Save America. They're liberal leaning. They acknowledge that, but they do criticize Biden, and I think more or less fairly. And they have said, no, this is always how it's been. There's nothing really new that we're seeing, or that those of us who have actually worked with him for at least a decade aren't expecting to see.
But still, those people, and I'm not going to say whether or not that's true, because again, they spent time with him. I haven't, but they still are going to have a bias and an agenda, right? There is.
Yes. Everybody does.
Right. And the problem partially is the fact that there isn't a bias agenda, but the bigger problem, I think, is the fact that we don't often acknowledge it. And so, especially among the always Trumpers and the never Trumpers, right? The never Trump, never, vote blue no matter who, Democrats, I find are more willing to overlook the same character flaws that they villainize in the political opponents.
I would characterize that differently.
And I would equally say that people on the right do the same thing. They overlook character flaws that they villainize on the left on people that they support. However, we need to acknowledge that because that happens, where people, even if we don't want to say villainize and look over, we can use softer terms of criticize and appraise. These people are, at the end of the day, I'm assuming, never Trumpers. People who are working for Biden, people who are typically on the left in general. I've never met a Democrat who was like, yeah, Trump wasn't that bad. It's always, every single Democrat I've met is, Trump's terrible. Whereas I've met a number of Republicans who are like, yeah, like my family included, a lot of them who are like, not everybody in my family, but some members of my family who are like, yeah, I mean, I didn't like a lot of Obama's presidencies, but he wasn't that bad.
Right.
I've never met someone who says that about Trump on the left. And we need to remember that if these people are saying Biden has been like this for decades, that very well could be. It very well could be. And statistically speaking, I would venture to say is likely. But if we're going to say that some people have an agenda to criticize his memory, we also need to say that some other people have an agenda to prop him up and say that he doesn't have a memory because they know what the alternative is.
That's true. And that's an important point. I am somebody that you could call a never Trumper. I'm not opposed to voting for a Republican who I think has good ideas and who I think would be a good leader. I haven't seen it yet, and I don't expect I ever will. And so, therefore, I do vote by party lines. That doesn't mean that I'm not critical. Sure. And that doesn't mean that the people who are never Trumpers are not critical of the Democratic candidates that they support and sometimes defend. The thing about the always Trumpers, though, it's not the same with them. They will defend him no matter what he does. He has even come out and said, I could shoot somebody in the street, basically saying he could get away with murder and still get their support. And I believe
Obama bombed and destroyed children's hospitals.
Right. But
and
you
still
have,
got and
you
and
have
didn't get a whole lot of criticism.
You have a lot of people on the left who would vote for Obama if he could run for a third term, who do criticize him for that. But
yeah, and a lot of people.
Hold on.
Okay, go ahead. You're right.
The thing about Trump is he truly is that detestable. And Biden, no matter what you have no matter what criticism you have for him, you cannot deny that he is, at the very least, better than Trump.
On what grounds? Because there's political grounds, there's moral grounds, there's economic grounds.
I guess on moral grounds.
I will give you on moral grounds.
Trump is an absolutely detestable person, and he has absolutely no care or desire to lead the country in any direction other than the direction that serves him.
Sure, but most presidents are going to do that, whether it's something that serves themselves or serves people in their party. And it's not just presidents, it's senators who accept a lot of money from lobbyists. It's Congress.
But Trump is willing to sell out his party.
And so are a ton of Democrats, man.
I'm not denying that.
The difference is, well, that's fair, but the difference is,
I feel like what it is every criticism that people have on the left of Republicans has just been distilled down into Trump. And it's you can, I mean, the argument that people say, it's like, oh, neither side is without flaws. That's absolutely correct. But it's Trump. You have to see the difference.
And that difference is the reason why I don't vote for him, because I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of his politics. I agree with a lot of his political stances. Not all. And I would say I would say maybe 60%, maybe a little bit more. But I don't like him as a person. And that's one of the reasons why I don't vote for him.
And you also recognize that his motivations are not about being a good president.
I would disagree with that. I think that it's a multi-serve, or not a multi-serve, a multi-purpose thing. I think part of it is he does want to be a good president. I think every president wants to be remembered as a good president, and that's why they run for president, to be remembered, and no one wants to be remembered as a terrible president.
Let me rephrase it then. His intention or his motivation is not to serve the country.
I would still argue that it is, and I would still argue that he just does it in a way that a lot of Democrats don't like. Because you got to remember, a lot of Republicans are believers, and I will admit that this is a highly criticized and somewhat dubious debate, but they believe in the idea of trickle-down economics.
Yeah.
And there is some evidence that shows that it does work, and there's some evidence that shows that it doesn't. And really, it depends on the execution of it. And so Trump...
Also, it's important to take in how historically it has panned out.
Well, and there have been multiple examples where historically it has and historically it has not panned out.
Yeah, but in the case of America,
in the case of America too. I mean, if you look at the Reagan era tax cuts, which were very similar to tax cuts for that Trump did, right? There were a lot of major corporate tax cuts and a lot of upper class tax cuts. In the 80s, it's helped, wasn't the only reason, but it did help with getting out of the recession and into a boom, because at the time it put a lot more cash into the economy immediately and stimulated some short-term growth.
Right. It also instigated the growing wage gap disparity.
Oh, see, I would say that's something with Nixon.
No, that was Reagan. I don't remember specifically what it was, but it allowed it removed a restriction for buying a certain type of stock, I think, which was then exploited by,
I know what you're talking about now.
You know, what we now call the 1%, and would not have happened if that had stayed in place, and is the reason why we have like 6 people that have more wealth than like the rest of the US population put together.
But the thing here is that Trumpers and myself, a non-Trumper, don't see a problem with that. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't see a problem with some people being super, super rich when we live in a society that is historically the best quality of living in almost every metric.
No. God, no.
Okay.
Do you know what the most dangerous city in the world is?
You're going to say...
I don't know if this is actually currently, but I at least know within the last 10 years it was at one point.
Chicago?
No, close.
What?
Sorry, the most... I don't remember if it was dangerous or most impoverished city. Detroit.
Most impoverished. Detroit, when you've got all of Bangladesh... Okay, most impoverished city in the world, according to a quick search in 2015, according to the Guardian, it was Niamey in Niger, tied with Bamako in Mali, and a city I'm not even going to try and pronounce because I'm going to butcher it, in Madagascar. 29 cities with the worst quality of life. Number 1 is Baghdad, Iraq. That's from 2016. List of cities by homicide rate. The first 7 are in Mexico. Number 8 is New Orleans. And then 9 and 10 are also in Mexico. In fact, in the top 25, the United States only has Memphis, Detroit, Baltimore, and New Orleans, which I should point out, all of which are very blue.
That's true. We can
talk about that another time, though.
We can talk about that later. I do want to say the specific thing that I'm referring to, I don't actually remember what the metric was, and I don't remember when it happened. So I'm going to actually just rescind that statement, but we are the most advanced nation in the world. That's for sure. We also have, I think, the highest infant mortality rate of any, like, of the next of any first world country. We are the only country of, like, the world's 30 wealthiest countries that doesn't have affordable healthcare. We have a homicide rate that is incredibly high for a country that doesn't have just, like, blatant like wars going on. I mean, we are so far behind. My point is, we're so far behind for being, the world's best country.
It just depends
in
on
almost
what
every metric.
It depends on what your it depends on what your metrics are.
Because what metric do you want to use?
Well, if you're looking at economic possibilities, it is there is no country on the world that is easier to start your own business than in the United States.
Okay.
And there is no country in the world with
Does that mean that you were able to actually, like, grow that business?
Yeah.
Because with these with trickle down economics, or I guess more specifically Reaganomics, it's become increasingly harder to work your way up and pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And the people that are making all of that money, all of these billionaires, they didn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They're not self-made men. That's a narrative that they push because it's convenient, makes them feel good about themselves. Really, what they did is they got a lot of help from a lot of people in positions of power in various ways, and they exploited the people around them in order to gain what they could, and gave relatively nothing back. And I mean, that's to their credit. That is the American dream. I mean, I'm not going to argue that that's not capitalism. That's why I think capitalism is bullshit.
I have so many thoughts, but I want to get to the other stuff that we said that we wanted to talk about more.